Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. Without wasting any time, let's start today's story with Minecraft gameplay in the background. Today's story is called She Isn't Loving Me Anymore. The cold coffee sloshed over the edge of the mug. As she slammed the suitcase shut, the sound echoed like a final door closing. In a house that used to be full of music, I stood in the doorway of our bedroom, watching the woman I'd spent 7 years with pack her life into 3 nylon bags. With terrifying mechanical efficiency, there were no tears, no screaming matches, just a heavy, suffocating indifference. I reached out to touch her shoulder, a desperate, instinctive move to bridge the miles of silence between us. She flinched before I even made contact. It wasn't the flinch of someone who was afraid. It was the flinch of someone who found my touch repulsive. "Don't," she said. Her voice was flat, emotionless, and it cut deeper than any insult. "The theater is over. I'm not doing this for another minute. Is it someone else?" I asked, even though the answer didn't matter anymore. The betrayal wasn't in an affair. It was in the way she had already checked out months ago, while letting me believe we were still building a future. She looked at me then. For a brief second, I saw a flash of the woman I loved. Then it vanished. In its place was a cold, analytical stare. "It's not someone else," she said. "It's just not you. It hasn't been you for a long time. I stayed because I felt sorry for you. But even that ran out." She moved toward the door. As she reached for the handle, her phone slipped from her pocket and skittered across the hardwood floor, coming to rest at my feet. I picked it up, intending to hand it back, but the screen was already lit. A notification from a security app I had never seen before. It showed a thumbnail image of our basement, a part of the house she hadn't stepped into in years. In a grainy night vision photo, a man stood in the center of the room, holding a folder that looked exactly like the one I kept locked inside my office safe. But it wasn't the intruder that stopped my heart. It was the date and timestamp. The photo was from 3 days ago. I looked down at the phone. Then I looked at her. She wasn't reaching for it anymore. She was just watching me. Her hand rested calmly on the heavy brass handle of the front door. A strange, dark calm settled over her face. "You should have just let me leave," she whispered. "Now you're gonna have to find out why I really stayed." The heavy thud of the front door echoed through the empty hallway, marking her final departure. The sound was quickly drowned out by the roar of blood in my ears. I didn't chase her. Instead, I turned toward the basement door, though it feeling strangely cold beneath my palm. For 7 years, I convinced myself the distance between us was just the slow decay of romance. But as I descended the stairs, the air grew thick with a metallic scent of ozone and something sharper, the smell of a long-term stakeout. The basement wasn't the graveyard of old furniture and holiday boxes I remembered. In the corner, hidden behind a false wall of stacked moving boxes, glowed a bank of monitors I had never seen before. They were silent, flickering with high-definition feeds of every room in the house, the kitchen, the garage, even our bedroom. I watched a recorded loop of myself sleeping. On the other side of the bed, she sat perfectly upright, staring at a tablet, her face lit by a blue, ghostly glow. She wasn't my wife. She was my warden. I moved to the center of the room, to the exact spot where the man in the photo had stood. On the floor lay a single overlooked item, a small, translucent vial with a medical label. I picked it up, my hands trembling. It wasn't heart medication. It wasn't vitamins. It was a potent, slow-acting paralytic, often used in clinical trials, the kind that mimics early-onset dementia, the brain fog I complained about for months, the missed appointments, the clumsiness she had patiently comforted me through. It hadn't been aging. It had been the chemical erosion. On my mind, I lunged for my office safe in the corner, my fingers fumbling with the combination. When a heavy door swung open, the folder was still there. But as I flipped through the pages of my architectural designs for the new city bridge, something felt wrong. The blueprints had been altered. Structural supports shifted by fractions of an inch. Load-bearing calculations off by just enough to be catastrophic, yet subtle enough to bypass a standard review. My signature sat at the bottom of every page, authenticated by a digital timestamp. That placed me in this basement. At 3 in the morning, 2 nights ago, my phone buzzed in my pocket. A text from her, sent from the safety of her car. The first concrete pour is at dawn, Mark. If you try to stop it, the authorities receive the recording of you confessing to the bribery. If you stay silent, the bridge falls, and you're the lead engineer who lost his mind. I didn't stop loving you. I just stopped needing you alive. To collect the payout, the steering wheel felt greasy under my palms as I tore toward the riverfront, the world blurring at the edges, from the chemicals still coursing through my system. Every few seconds, my brain would stutter, a glitch, a moment where I forgot where I was going, only to be snapped back by the sight of construction cranes looming over the water, like skeletal executioners. It was 4:30 in the morning. The dawn bruised the horizon purple, and the first fleet of cement trucks was already lining up. Their heavy drums rotated slowly, grinding, methodical, inevitable. I didn't have a badge anymore. I didn't have a team. I just had a folder of sabotage blueprints and a wrench I'd grabbed from the garage. I bypassed the main gate, cutting through a jagged hole in the perimeter fence I'd noted during a site visit 3 weeks ago. Back when I thought I was a man with a future, I stayed low, moving through the shadows of massive steel girders, my heart slamming against my ribs. My balance was shot. The paralytic made the ground feel alive, like a ship pitching in a storm. I reached the central pier, the massive concrete formwork, where the primary support column was scheduled to be poured. If that concrete hit the rebar now, the flaws would be buried forever. The bridge would stand for a year, maybe 2, until the first heavy wind or a fully loaded semi-truck hit the sweet spot of the structural weakness. Then it wouldn't be an accident. It would be a massacre. Mark, what the hell are you doing here? I spun around, nearly losing my footing. It was Elias, my site foreman. He stood there with a clipboard, his face caught between confusion and growing suspicion. He didn't look like a friend. He looked like a man, watching a lunatic unravel. The poor Elias. You have to stop it. I gasped, bracing myself against a pile of lumber. The specs were changed. The load-bearing calculations in the safe were compromised. Elias didn't look at the folder in my hands. He checked his watch, and he looked back at me, his expression tightening with pity. Mark, we talked about this. You've been confused. Sarah called me an hour ago. She was crying. She said you had another episode, that you took the files and ran. She's worried. You're going to hurt yourself. She's lying. I screamed. She's been drugging me. The desperation in my voice sounded exactly like the episodes she'd been documenting for months. I heard the hiss of air brakes. The first truck was backing into position. Over the central pier, the chute began to lower. I can't let you stay here, Mark, Elias said, lifting his radio. I'm calling medics. Just sit down before you fall. I looked at the chute. Then I looked at Elias, and I understood something with terrifying clarity. I couldn't convince him. My reputation was already ash, buried under months of her careful preparation. So I did the only thing left, the only act that would trigger a federal investigation instead of a medical one. I lunged past Elias and threw myself onto the rebar grid, directly into the path of the pouring concrete. The heavy, gray sludge of the first pour hit the rebar inches from my boots. The sound like a wet landslide. Elias was screaming into his radio, but I didn't move. I stayed pinned to the steel grid, the cold mud of the concrete, splashing against my shins, a human barricade, against a structural catastrophe. Stop the pour, Elias roared, finally signaling the driver. The grinding of the truck halted, leaving behind a ringing silence, broken only by the distant wail of sirens. 10 minutes later, I was face down on the cold gravel, my wrists biting into plastic zip ties. The brain fog was thicker than ever, a suffocating veil that turned the flashing blue and red lights into strobe flashes from a nightmare. Sarah was there, standing just outside the police perimeter, a pashmina wrapped around her shoulders, her face sculpted into perfect concern. He's sick, I heard her tell the lead officer. her voice trembling just enough. He's been hallucinating about the bridge. He thinks people are changing his designs. I try to keep him home, but he's become so unpredictable. The officer looked down at me with a mix of pity and disgust. He nearly killed himself, ma'am, and he's lucky he didn't take the site crew with him. I have the blueprints, I croaked, my cheek pressed into the dirt. Check the safe. Check the folder in the car. The officer waved his partner over. He pulled the folder from my sedan, flipped through the pages, his expression never changing. These match the site specs perfectly, Mark. There's no sabotage here. My heart stopped. She had swapped them, somewhere between the basement and the bridge. She had followed me and replaced the altered plans with the originals. She hadn't just framed me for insanity. She'd erased the crime before it was ever committed. As they hauled me to my feet and dragged me toward the ambulance, I caught her eye. For a split second, the grieving wife mask slipped. She gave me a tiny, almost imperceptible wink. She didn't want the bridge to fall today. She wanted me locked away in a psychiatric ward where no one would ever listen to my delusions again. But as the medic reached for my arm to inject the sedative, I felt something sharp hidden in the lining of my sleeve. A small, metallic shape. The translucent vial from the basement. I hadn't dropped it. The white walls of the observation room felt like they were closing in, the fluorescent lights humming at a frequency that made the poison in my blood vibrate. I sat on the edge of the bolted-down bed, clutching the vial hidden in my sleeve, watching Sarah through the reinforced glass. She was speaking with the head psychiatrist, her hands moving in elegant, sorrowful gestures, discussing my long-term care options. She wasn't just erasing my career. She was erasing my existence. Mr. Thorne, it's time for your evening transition, the orderly said, entering with a tray. He was a mountain of a man with bored eyes. He reached for my arm, and this time I didn't pull away. I need to see the toxicology report, I whispered, my voice thin and ragged. The labs came back clean, Mark, he replied. Just elevated stress markers. Now let's get you settled. Clean. Either she had friends in the lab, or the paralytic was designed to vanish into normal metabolic noise. That was the moment I understood. I couldn't survive as the victim. I had to become the monster. She'd already convinced everyone I was. As the orderly reached for the sedative, I lunged not at him, but at the water carafe. I smashed it against the bed frame, glass exploding across the floor, and before he could react, I swallowed the remaining liquid in the vial. The reaction was immediate. My nervous system ignited. My body locked into violent convulsions. As I crashed to the floor, my vision folding inward. Alarm screamed. Sarah and the doctor rushed in, their faces frozen in shock. He's seizing, the doctor shouted. Get the crash cart. As they rolled me onto my back, I grabbed Sarah's wrist, strength driven by pure chemical adrenaline. I pulled her close, my mouth inches from her ear. The vial is in the doctor's pocket, I gasped, and the basement cameras are streaming. To the city server, Sarah, I didn't just find the monitors. I redirected the feed. Check your phone. It was a lie. A perfect one. There was no cloud feed. But she didn't know that. I watched the color drain from her face. The grieving wife mask shattered, replaced by naked panic. She reached for her phone, a frantic, instinctive move that drew every eye in the room. In a confusion, the doctor pulled the empty vial from his lab coat pocket. He stared at the label, then at Sarah, then at my spiking vitals. This isn't a seizure, he said quietly. This is an overdose of a restricted paralytic. Ma'am, why are you trying to leave? Sarah was already backing toward the door, her composure gone, her love replaced by the instinct of a cornered predator. But the doors were locked. The same police I'd faced at the bridge were standing right outside. As the medics worked to save my life, the world faded to a dull gray. Through the haze, I saw the handcuffs close around her wrists. She wasn't loving me anymore, and for the first time in 7 years, I was perfectly fine with that. The bridge is safe. The vial is in evidence, and the woman who tried to bury me is headed for a cell. When love turns into a weapon, sometimes the only way to survive is to pull the trigger first. Have you ever had to act insane just to prove you were sane? And just when you think the worst betrayal is behind you, the next story proves it can go even deeper. I told her parents about her past. The tea service sat between us, delicate china clinking as her father's hand began to shake. We were in the sunroom of their estate, a place that once felt like old money and safety, but now the air smelled like scorched bridges. I didn't wait for him to ask. I slid the folder across the mahogany table. Inside were the records from Zurich, the aliases, the bank accounts he had never been allowed to see. She wasn't the prodigal daughter who came home to save the family business. She was the reason it had been bleeding millions 3 years ago. She's been siphoning the trust through a shell company in the Caymans. I said, breaking the silence. She didn't stop loving me because she grew distant, Arthur. She stopped because I found the ledger. She needed me gone before the audit. Arthur stared at the photos. His daughter, standing beside a man she'd called her spiritual advisor. A man who was actually a known corporate liquidator. The color drained from his face, from warm and wealthy to something thin and hollow. When he looked at me, his eyes held heartbreak and something colder. You realize what you've done, don't you, Mark? He whispered. By telling me this, you forced my hand. I spent 40 years building this legacy. I can't let it be destroyed by a scandal, even if that scandal is my own blood. He didn't call the police. He didn't call his daughter. He reached beneath the table and pressed a silent alarm. The heavy oak doors hissed shut, locking with a sound like a tomb sealing itself. I loved her, Arthur, I said, the weight of my choice tightening around my throat. I thought you deserved the truth. The truth, he replied, standing with sudden strength, is a luxury we can no longer afford. She told me you were becoming unstable. She said you were obsessed with her past. I didn't believe her until you walked in here with secrets that could destroy us all. That's when it hit me. She hadn't just been stealing from him. She had been acting on his behalf. Her past wasn't just hers. It was the family's. And now, I was the only person outside their bloodline who knew where the bodies were buried. The magnetic hum of the sunroom doors felt like it was vibrating through my teeth. Arthur stood by the window, silhouetted against the manicured lawn. He didn't look like a grieving father. He looked like a general, surveying a battlefield he had already won. My eyes drifted to the folder on the table, the one I thought was my shield. That's when it hit me. I hadn't exposed him. I had handed him a list of his own greatest hits. She's a fast learner, isn't she? Arthur said. His voice carried no warmth at all. The shell companies, the liquidation protocols. I taught her those when she was 16. You didn't find her past, Mark. You found her apprenticeship. The realization hit harder than any physical blow. The distance between us, the coldness in our bed. It wasn't because she had stopped loving me. It was because I had changed. I had graduated from husband to liability. I was a civilian who had wandered into a war room. You're not leaving this estate. With that information, Arthur continued, turning to face me. But I'm a reasonable man. My daughter says you were. The best thing that ever happened to her. Right up until you started. Looking under the floorboards, he walked to a hidden wall safe and pulled out a single, heavy document. He tossed it onto the table, beside my folder, a non-disclosure agreement. But the terms told a different story. If I signed it, I'd be confessing to crimes I never committed, crimes she had committed. In return, I'd receive a severance, enough money to live in luxury for the rest of my life, as long as I stayed in a country without an extradition treaty. Sign it, Arthur said, and you're a wealthy man in Marbella. Refuse, and the police will find the Zurich accounts in your name by morning. My daughter is already at the station, Mark. She's giving a statement about your financial abuse. The precision of it was terrifying. She hadn't stopped loving me. She had been preparing for the divorce since our wedding day. Every dinner, every vacation, every I love you, all of it had been a deposition. I reached for the pen, my fingers hovering over the paper. That's when I noticed something on Arthur's desk, a small, blinking light on a secondary tablet, a live GPS feed, 2 signals, one at the police station, just like he said. The other was moving fast, heading toward the private docks at the edge of the estate. I looked back at the folder I had brought with me. I hadn't told Arthur everything. I had kept one page back, the page that showed a third party involved in the liquidations. A party siphoning from him too. She's not at the station, Arthur, I said, my voice calm. Cold. Check your secondary accounts. She's not just liquidating me. She's liquidating you. The color drained from Arthur's face so fast. He looked like a statue carved from salt. He lunged for the tablet, fingers trembling, as he pulled up the real-time ledgers for his primary holdings. The screen exploded into red. This wasn't a leak. It was a full breach. The apprenticeship was over. She hadn't just surpassed the master. She was burning the classroom down. On her way out, she wouldn't. Arthur choked. The arrogance in his voice collapsed into a thin, rattling gasp. She's my daughter. She knows the rules. She knows your rules, Arthur, I said. The balance of power finally shifting. Rule number 1, never leave a witness. Rule number 2, assets are more loyal than blood. She's just being the woman you raised her to be. Arthur didn't hesitate. He grabbed a desk phone and punched in a code. The magnetic locks disengaged. The hiss of the sunroom doors opening sounded like a starting pistol. He looked at me. 10 minutes ago, he was ready to bury me. Now, for the first time, he saw an equal, or at least, a necessary evil. My car is in the garage, he snapped, already moving down the hallway, with a speed that defied his age. The speedboat is a custom Riva. It's got a GPS lockout, but once she hits open water, she'll jam the signal. We have 6 minutes before she clears the bay. We sprinted through the marble foyer, past a confused security detail, and piled into his obsidian black sedan. Arthur drove like a man possessed. Tires screamed against the gravel as we tore toward the docks. At the edge of the estate, the silence between us had changed. It wasn't about secrets anymore. It was about the shared realization that we had both been played by the same person, using the same weapon. Our belief that she still loved us. We rounded the final bend of the driveway. The pier came into view. The Riva was already 30 yards out, its weight carving a white, jagged scar. Across the dark water, I saw her silhouette at the helm, the woman I had married. Her hair whipped violently in the wind. She didn't look back. She didn't need to. She carried a briefcase, holding the digital keys to Arthur's empire and the evidence that would have put me in a cage for life. She's heading for the freighter, I shouted, pointing toward the massive lights. 2 miles offshore. If she boards that vessel, she's under a Panamanian flag. We'll never touch her. Arthur slammed the brakes. At the edge of the pier, the car skidded to a stop, inches from the water. He didn't look at the boat. He looked at the control box. At the end of the dock, the one tied to the estate's underwater security net, designed to keep intruders out. She forgot one thing, Arthur said, his eyes gleaming with something ancient and predatory. I didn't just teach her how to sail. I taught her how to survive a wreck. The heavy steel cables of the security net burst through the surface with a violent metallic scream. The Riva didn't have time to swerve. It hit the line at 40 knots. The bow pitched forward as the hull tore open like a tin can. Fiberglass shattered, metal twisted. The sound echoed across the bay. Then everything went quiet. The engine died. The boat didn't just stop. It disintegrated. A violent plume of white spray and debris erupted into the night air. She's in the water, Arthur shouted. His voice carried horror and something worse, triumph. I didn't wait. I kicked off my shoes and dove into the dark water. The cold hit like a hammer. The current grabbed my clothes, dragging me sideways. But I forced my way forward. The water was slick with oil. Then I saw her, a flash of blonde hair, a red life vest. She bobbed near the sinking stern. Her hand was locked around the briefcase. White knuckles. Her face was bloodied. Salt water streamed from her eyes. I reached her, just as the stern began its final descent. She looked at me. For the first time in years, the indifference was gone. In its place was raw, primal fear. Mark, she gasped. Water splashed in her mouth as she fought to stay afloat. Help me. The strap. It's caught. I looked down. The reinforced leather strap. was tangled in the submerged railing. The sinking boat was pulling her down with it. 1 foot under, then 2. Her eyes widened, pleading. I felt the knife in my hand, the one I'd taken from the sunroom. I could cut the strap and save her. I could cut the strap, take the briefcase, and let the boat finish the job. Or I could let them both go, be free of the past. I had uncovered. I dove under. Salt burned my eyes. The briefcase was heavier than I expected, a dead weight. The digital soul of the family empire. Locked inside, her hand reached for mine. Her fingers brushed my wrist, the same way she used to hold me. In her sleep, the pressure closed in, not just from the water, from a choice. She hadn't loved me for years. She had used me, a shield, a pawn, a ghost. The boat let out, one final, gurgling groan, and in that moment, I made my choice. I sliced through the leather strap, but I didn't reach for her hand. I reached for the briefcase. As the Riva disappeared into the black abyss of the bay, the sudden loss of weight sent her shooting back to the surface. She gasped for air, thrashing wildly. I surfaced a few feet away, kicking hard against the current. The heavy case pressed my chest, like a life raft. By the time we dragged ourselves onto the jagged shoreline, Arthur was already there. His silhouette loomed over us, moonlight glinting off the barrel of a small revolver, pulled from his coat. The case, Mark, he ordered. His voice was cold as the Atlantic. Bring it here. And Sarah, get up. You're a disgrace, but you're still a thorn. We'll settle your inheritance. In private, Sarah collapsed onto the whetstones, shivering, broken. Her eyes never left the briefcase. I stood slowly, water dripping from my clothes, and walked toward the man who thought he'd won everything back. You said you taught her everything, Arthur. I said, my voice steady. But you forgot something. I lived with her for 7 years. I learned how she hides things. I didn't hand him the case. I opened it. Inside was a waterproof shell. Empty. No hard drives. No ledgers. No digital keys. What is this? Arthur roared. The gun shook in his hand. Where is it? She didn't have it on the boat, I said. She's smarter than that. I looked down at Sarah. Her fear shifted into realization. I told her father about her past. To make him panic, I continued. I knew he'd lock the estate down. I knew she'd run. But the files, they were already sent. Sent where? Sarah whispered. To your father's rival, I said. The man who's tried to buy your firm for 10 years. I didn't want the money, and I didn't want revenge. I wanted competition. Enough of it. To burn the house down. So neither of you could ever use it as a weapon again. I pulled a small envelope from my inner pocket, the only thing I kept dry. This is the transfer confirmation, I said. Your legacy didn't go to the Caymans. It went to a whistleblower fund. In my name, by tomorrow morning, the SEC will be at your door. And your daughter? She's already signed a plea deal. She'll be the star witness. Arthur looked at the gun, then at his daughter, then out at the empty bay. The past I exposed wasn't a secret. It was a fuse, and I had been the match. You never loved me, Sarah spat. Salt water burned her eyes. No, I said, turning away toward the road lights. I love the woman. I thought you were. But she never existed. The empire is a smoking ruin. The perfect daughter is a federal witness. And I'm walking away with the only thing that matters. The truth. When the people you love turn out to be strangers, sometimes the only way to find yourself is to burn the map they gave you. Have you ever realized the person beside you was a complete stranger? Tell us your story in the comments. Like and subscribe for more descents into the heart of betrayal. Until next time, stay vigilant and never trust a thorn